Miguel Ramirez's hands trembled as he held his father's pendant, watching the millionaire's face drain of color. "Where did you get that?" Richard Whitmore whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the expensive Mercedes engine Miguel had just repaired. In that moment, everything Miguel thought he knew about his father, his family, and his place in the world shattered like glass on concrete. The pendant wasn't just a keepsake, it was evidence of corporate murder, a billion-dollar conspiracy, and the real reason his papa had died at 29, leaving his family struggling on the margins of society. What happens when the son of an immigrant discovers that his father's death wasn't an accident, but a calculated murder by the wealthy elite? How far would you go to uncover a truth that powerful men have spent millions to keep buried? Could the hands of a teenager from the barrio, hands stained with motor oil and calloused from years of hard work, possibly deliver justice where courts and police had failed? If you're enjoying this story, please make sure to subscribe to our Story Hispanic channel. The journey we're about to embark on together reveals truths about power, justice, and resilience that will resonate with anyone who's ever felt invisible in America. Stay with me until the end to fully understand what Miguel discovers about his father's legacy and how it changes everything. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalks of Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood as Miguel pedaled his bike home from Frank's auto repair. At 17, he had the kind of wiry strength that came from necessity, not from expensive gym memberships. His backpack bounced against his shoulders, heavy with textbooks, and weighed down further by the scholarship letter he wasn't sure he should even consider. "Otro dia, otro dollar," he muttered to himself, thinking about the shift he'd just finished. The scent of motor oil and degreaser clung to his skin like a second identity, as familiar as his abuela's cooking. Home wasn't far now, just past the old textile factory, and through the neighborhood where faces like his were the majority, where Spanish flowed as freely as English, and where everyone knew everyone else's business. But Miguel's mind wasn't on dinner or homework. It was on the letter folded carefully in his back pocket. The prestigious Midwest Institute of Mechanical Engineering had written offering a full scholarship opportunity for students who show exceptional promise. The words made him laugh. Sure, he could take apart an engine blindfolded, but exceptional. That was for kids from the North Side, kids whose parents drove them to SAT prep classes instead of working double shifts at the hospital like his mama. As he rounded the corner onto Industrial Avenue, his thoughts were interrupted by an unusual sight. A sleek black Mercedes, the kind you only saw in this neighborhood when someone was lost or looking for trouble, sat at an awkward angle on the shoulder. Steam rose from under its hood like a defeated flag. Miguel slowed his bike. Every instinct told him to keep going. A young Latino kid approaching a fancy car with out-of-state plates. That story rarely ended well in America. His cousin Marco had been stopped by police just last month for looking suspicious near a BMW, despite being on his way to his job at the local library. But as he got closer, he could see the driver, an older white man in an expensive suit, talking frantically into his phone and gesturing at the car like it had personally betrayed him. "No, I told you I can't wait 2 hours for a tow," the man was saying. "I have a board meeting at 7. Miguel's fingers tightened on the handlebars. "Keep going," his mind whispered. "Not your problem." But then the man looked up, and their eyes met. There was something in his expression, not fear or suspicion as Miguel had expected, but genuine distress, and beneath that, embarrassment. Before he could talk himself out of it, Miguel called out, "Engine trouble." The man lowered his phone, surprised. "Yes, actually. It just died. No warning." He paused, studying Miguel. "You know anything about cars?" Miguel couldn't help but smile a little. He pulled his bike onto the grass and approached the car. Up close he could appreciate its lines, a Mercedes S-Class, probably last year's model, the kind of machine he'd only worked on in his dreams. "Mind if I take a look?" Miguel asked. Already moving toward the hood, the man, Mr. Whitmore, as he introduced himself, seemed hesitant for a moment, then nodded. "Please, I'm already late," but Miguel was already under the hood, his practiced eyes scanning the engine. "When did it start acting up?" Miguel asked, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this since he was tall enough to reach an engine block. "About 5 minutes ago. It started losing power, then just stopped." Miguel nodded, his fingers tracing along the components. Sounds like your alternator. See this belt here? It's slipping. And these connections, he pointed to a series of wires, corroded, probably been building up for months. Mr. Whitmore leaned in, clearly impressed. You can tell all that just by looking. It's like reading a story, Miguel said, not looking up from his work. Every engine tells you what's wrong if you know how to listen. For the next 20 minutes, Miguel worked while Mr. Whitmore watched, occasionally asking questions that revealed he knew more about boardrooms than brake lines. But there was something else in his questions, a genuine curiosity about Miguel himself. So you work at a garage, Mr. Whitmore asked, part-time after school and weekends. And you learned all this there? Miguel shrugged, some of it. My papa taught me the basics before he passed. Rest I picked up on my own. Your father was a mechanic, something like that. Miguel reached for a wrench in his backpack. He worked with machines, all kinds. As he leaned deeper into the engine compartment, something slipped out from under his shirt, a silver pendant on a worn leather cord. It caught the fading sunlight, revealing an intricate design, two hands cradling a star. The change in Mr. Whitmore was immediate. His casual interest sharpened into something intense, almost hungry. That pendant, he said, his voice suddenly tight. Where did you get that? Miguel straightened, confused by the sudden shift in tone. He touched the pendant self-consciously. It was my papa's, one of the only things I have from him. Mr. Whitmore's face had gone pale. He stared at the pendant like it was a ghost, his lips moving slightly as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. Sir? Miguel asked, growing uncomfortable. You okay? The older man seemed to shake himself back to the present. Yes, it's just, that's a very unique design. I've seen it before. Really? Despite his unease, Miguel was curious. Where? But Mr. Whitmore had already turned away, pulling out his phone again. I should call my office, let them know I'll be late. Miguel returned to the engine, but the moment had shifted something. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken questions. When he finally got the car running again, a temporary fix involving some creative wire work and a prayer. Mr. Whitmore seemed almost distracted as he thanked him. Here the man said, pulling out his wallet. Let me pay you for your time. No need, Miguel said quickly, just doing what anyone would do. Not anyone. Mr. Whitmore corrected. He held out a business card instead. Richard Whitmore, Whitmore Ventures. If you ever need anything, a recommendation, advice about that engineering program you mentioned. Miguel took the card, surprised. How did you know about that? Mr. Whitmore smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. You mentioned you were considering it while you were working. You should go. Don't let anything hold you back. As Miguel watched the Mercedes disappear down Industrial Avenue, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. Something bigger than fixing a stranger's car. He touched the pendant again, feeling its familiar weight against his chest. What was it about this old piece of silver that had shaken Richard Whitmore so badly? The sun had set completely now, and the street lights were flickering on. Miguel got back on his bike, but instead of feeling accomplished, he felt unsettled, like he'd just opened a door he didn't know existed. Chapter 2, Fractured Echoes. The smell of Elena Ramirez's famous arroz con pollo filled their small apartment. As Miguel walked through the door, his 8-year-old sister Sophia was at the kitchen table, tongue stuck out in concentration as she worked on her math homework. You're late, his mother called from the stove, not turning around. Frank keep you overtime again? No, Miguel hesitated, then decided to just say it. I stopped to help someone with car trouble. This rich guy, his Mercedes broke down on Industrial. Elena finally turned, wiping her hands on her apron. At 42, she still had the same determined set to her jaw that Miguel saw in his own mirror every morning. Rich guy in our neighborhood, her eyebrow rose skeptically. Yeah, he was lost, I think. But Mama, the strangest thing happened. Miguel dropped his backpack and moved to the sink to wash his hands. He saw Papa's pendant and just froze, asked me where I got it. The wooden spoon clattered against the pot. Elena's whole body had gone rigid. Why were you wearing that thing? Her voice was sharp, almost angry. I told you to keep it in the drawer. I always wear it. You know that. Elena turned back to the stove, but Miguel could see the tension in her shoulders. That pendant brings nothing but questions we don't need. Put it away. Questions about what? About Papa. Miguel, the warning in her voice was clear. Leave it alone, but he couldn't. Not now. After dinner, while Elena helped Sophia with her homework, Miguel retreated to his room. He pulled out the old shoebox from under his bed, his collection of his father's things. 2 photographs, a few tools, some papers that meant nothing to him. He studied the photos again. In one, his father stood proudly next to some kind of machine, the pendant visible at his throat. In the other, Eduardo Ramírez was shaking hands with 2 other men in what looked like a warehouse. One man's face was turned away from the camera, but there was something familiar about his build, his posture. Miguel opened his laptop and typed Richard Whitmore into the search bar. The results made him sit back in surprise. This wasn't just some rich guy. Richard Whitmore was a legitimate millionaire, a venture capitalist who'd made his fortune investing in tech startups and engineering patents. Exceptional promise, Miguel muttered, remembering the letter from the engineering program. He clicked through more articles, reading about Whitmore's investments, his company, his reputation for finding innovative talent. A soft knock interrupted his research. Sophia peeked around the door. Miguel, can you help me with my science project? Sure, Princesa. He closed the laptop, but his mind was still racing. Why would someone like Richard Whitmore recognize his father's pendant? The next morning at Frank's auto repair, Miguel found it hard to concentrate. He kept replaying yesterday's encounter, the way Whitmore's face had changed when he saw the pendant. Earth to Miguel, Frank's gruff voice cut through his thoughts. That transmission isn't going to fix itself. Sorry, Frank. Miguel forced himself to focus, but his hands moved automatically while his mind wandered. His phone buzzed just before lunch, an email from an address he didn't recognize. He opened it, nearly dropping the phone when he saw the signature, Richard Whitmore, Miguel, I wanted to thank you again for your help yesterday. Your knowledge of mechanical systems is impressive. I'm hosting a private technology demonstration this Saturday at the Palmer House Hotel. I think you'd find it interesting given your obvious talents. Consider this a personal invitation. Best regards, Richard Whitmore. Miguel read it 3 times, his heart racing. A tech demonstration at the Palmer House. That was the kind of thing kids from his neighborhood only saw in movies. Yo, Miguel. His best friend Carlos appeared in the garage doorway. Basketball under one arm. Lunch break. You coming? They sat on the bench outside, sharing sandwiches while Miguel showed Carlos the email. This the same guy you helped yesterday? Carlos asked, suspicious. The one who freaked about your dad's necklace, pendant. And yeah, Carlos shook his head. I don't know, man. Rich white dude suddenly interested in you, inviting you to fancy hotels, sounds sketchy. Or it sounds like an opportunity, Miguel countered, touching the pendant absently. What if he actually knew my papa? What if this is my chance to learn something? Learn what? Your pops died when you were little. Sometimes the past should stay buried. But Carlos didn't understand. He had both parents, knew his whole family history back 3 generations. Miguel had fragments, pieces that didn't fit together, and a mother who shut down every time he asked questions. I'm going, Miguel decided. Your mom know about this. Miguel's silence was answer enough. That evening, Elena found the email open on Miguel's laptop while he was in the shower. When he came out, she was sitting on his bed, fury and fear warring in her expression. Absolutely not, she said, before he could speak. You don't even know what it's about. I know enough. She stood pacing the small room. That man, that world, it's not for us, Miguel. Your father thought he could play in their league. And look what happened. What did happen, Mama? You never tell me anything, because there's nothing to tell. But her voice cracked, betraying her. Eduardo died, heart attack. End of story. Then why are you so scared of a pendant? Of me going to some tech demo? Carmen stopped pacing, her shoulders sagging. You don't understand what you're walking into. Then tell me. But she just shook her head and left the room. Saturday morning, Miguel put on his best clothes, khakis, and a button-down that were usually reserved for church, and slipped out before Elena woke up. The bus ride to downtown felt like crossing into another world. The Palmer House Hotel rose like a golden monument to old money and older power. Inside, the lobby made him feel instantly out of place. Crystal chandeliered, marble floors, people in suits that probably cost more than his mother made in a month. He almost turned around. Miguel, Richard Whitmore strode across the lobby, looking genuinely pleased to see him. Today he seemed more relaxed, less corporate, but there was still something intense in the way he looked at Miguel. I'm glad you came. The demonstration's upstairs, but first he gestured to a quiet corner. We need to talk. They sat in plush armchairs while servers in bow ties glided past. Whitmore leaned forward, his voice low. That pendant you're wearing, it belonged to a man I once owed my life to. Miguel's hand went instinctively to his chest. My father, Whitmore nodded slowly. Eduardo Ramirez. Your father wasn't just some mechanic, Miguel, he was brilliant. A genius, really. And he was my friend. The words hit Miguel like physical blows. Brilliant, genius, friend, these weren't words anyone had ever used to describe his father. I don't understand, Miguel managed. If you were friends, why haven't we ever met? Whitmore's face darkened. Because I failed him when he needed me most. I stayed silent, and I've regretted it every day since. Before Miguel could ask more, Whitmore stood abruptly. Come on. There's something you need to see. They rode the elevator in silence, Miguel's mind spinning. When the doors opened, they stepped into a conference room filled with prototypes, displays, technical demonstrations. But Whitmore led him past all of it to a small display case in the corner. Inside was a photograph. 3 men standing in front of a complex machine. Miguel recognized his father immediately, young and proud. Next to him stood a younger Richard Whitmore. And the third man? Miguel asked, pointing to the third figure. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Clayton Reynolds. Our former partner. The man who destroyed everything your father built. Miguel stared at the photograph, at his father's confident smile, at the pendant visible at his throat, the same pendant that now hung around Miguel's neck. The weight of it suddenly felt different. Heavier with meaning he was only beginning to understand. Tell me everything, Miguel said quietly. Whitmore looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. You deserve to know the truth. All of it. As the tech demonstration continued around them, ignored and forgotten, Richard Whitmore began to tell Miguel about Eduardo Ramirez, the inventor, the visionary, the man who died with secrets that were finally coming to light. Outside the Palmer house, storm clouds were gathering over Chicago. But inside, in that quiet corner, the real storm was just beginning. Chapter 3. Buried Truths. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Palmer House conference room as Richard Whitmore pulled out a worn leather portfolio. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing photographs and documents that had been hidden away for nearly 2 decades. Your father and I met at MIT, Whitmore began, his voice heavy with memories. Spring of 1999. I was struggling with advanced thermodynamics, and Eduardo was already designing systems that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade. Miguel leaned forward, studying a faded photograph of 2 young men in a cluttered laboratory. His father, Eduardo Ramirez, looked impossibly young, wearing a lab coat and that same confident smile Miguel had seen in the few pictures they had at home. We were assigned as lab partners for our senior project, Whitmore continued. I suggested we build something safe, something that would guarantee us a good grade. Eduardo wanted to revolutionize industrial safety monitoring. He won that argument. What did you build? A mechanical stress detection system that could identify microscopic fractures in metal before they became dangerous. The professors were impressed. The industry was skeptical, but Eduardo didn't care about skepticism. He cared about potential. Whitmore flipped to another photo. After graduation, we pulled our savings, all $3,000 of it, and rented this tiny garage in Boston. Ramírez Whitmore Technologies. He chuckled softly. God, we were naive. What changed? Success, Whitmore said simply. Eduardo's designs worked better than anyone imagined. We got our first contract with a small auto parts manufacturer. Then Boeing came calling. Within 2 years we had 40 employees and more orders than we could handle. He pulled out a newspaper clipping. Young inventors strike gold with revolutionary safety technology. That's when Clayton Reynolds entered our lives. Whitmore's expression darkened. He was a venture capitalist, specialized in defense technology. He saw what Eduardo was creating and wanted in, offered us $10 million in funding. Did you take it? Eduardo was hesitant. He'd grown up poor, like you, and was suspicious of easy money. But I convinced him. Whitmore's voice cracked slightly. I thought I was being smart. Reynolds seemed legitimate. He had connections, experience, everything we lacked. Whitmore showed Miguel another photograph. 3 men in expensive suits, standing in front of a gleaming office building. Innovative Systems Technologies, our new company. Reynolds insisted on the rebrand. Said Ramírez. Whitmore sounded like a law firm. My father agreed to this. He was focused on the work. As long as he could keep inventing, keep improving his designs, he didn't care what name was on the door. That was his first mistake. Mine was trusting Reynolds with the business side completely. Whitmore stood and walked to the window, looking out over Chicago's skyline. Your father's technology evolved rapidly. What started as simple stress detection became something extraordinary. Sensors that could predict structural failures days before they happened. Prevent catastrophic accidents, save lives. That sounds amazing. It was until Reynolds started pushing for military applications. He saw dollar signs, defense contracts worth hundreds of millions. He wanted to modify Eduardo's sensors for weapons guidance systems, target acquisition, battlefield surveillance. What did my father say? He refused, absolutely refused. Said his work was meant to preserve life, not take it. They had terrible arguments. Reynolds would scream about missed opportunities, about competitors getting ahead. Eduardo would quietly go back to his lab and keep working on civilian applications. Whitmore returned to his seat, pulling out a thick folder marked confidential. Then we discovered what Reynolds had been doing behind our backs. He'd been filing patents on variations of Eduardo's designs, small modifications that could be weaponized, using shell companies to sell prototypes to defense contractors. He'd built an entire shadow business based on your father's work. Without permission, without knowledge. When Eduardo found out, Whitmore shook his head. I'd never seen him so angry. He confronted Reynolds in front of the entire board. Said he'd rather destroy every prototype than let them be used for killing. What happened? Reynolds had been preparing for this. He'd structured our contracts, our patents, everything to give him control. Worse, he had leverage on me. Some bad investments I'd made, debts I couldn't pay. He threatened to destroy us both unless Eduardo signed over his rights. But my father didn't sign. No, he vanished instead. One night, he cleared out his lab, took his most important research, his prototypes, everything, left me this note. Whitmore handed Miguel a piece of paper, creased from years of folding and unfolding. Andy, I'm sorry, but I can't let him win. What we created was meant to help people, not hurt them. I've taken what matters most. Keep the pendant safe. If something happens to me, make sure my family gets it. There's more to it than you know. Eduardo the pendant. Miguel touched his chest where it hung. He gave it to me that last day, said it was important. But after he disappeared, I searched everywhere for him. 3 weeks later, I got word he died. Heart attack, they said. You didn't believe it. Eduardo was 29, healthy, no history of heart problems, but I had no proof of anything else. Reynolds took over the company completely, pushed me out within 6 months. I've spent 20 years wondering if I could have done something different. Miguel studied the older man's face, seeing the guilt etched in every line. What happened to my father's research? The stuff he took. I assumed it was lost, until today, when I saw you wearing that pendant. They sat in silence for a moment before Miguel asked, Do you think Reynolds had my father killed? I can't prove anything. But Clayton Reynolds is now worth $15 billion, and every cent came from technology your father invented. You can draw your own conclusions. That evening, Miguel confronted his mother. Elena was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup with more force than necessary, while Sophia did homework at the table. Sophia, go to your room, Miguel said. But I'm not done. Now. His tone must have conveyed the seriousness, because Sophia gathered her books without argument. Once they were alone, Miguel placed the business card on the table. Richard Whitmore, Papa's old business partner. The spoon clattered against the pot. Elena gripped the counter, her knuckles white. Why didn't you tell me? Miguel demanded. Why did you let me think Papa was just some mechanic? Elena turned, and Miguel was shocked to see tears in her eyes. His mother never cried, because knowing the truth got your father killed, she said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mama. What really happened? Elena sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than her years. Your father was brilliant, Miguel, but brilliance isn't always enough in this world. She shook her head. He thought if you were smart enough, worked hard enough, played by the rules. He didn't understand that men like Clayton Reynolds don't play by rules. Whitmore told me about the company, about the patents. Whitmore, Elena's voice turned bitter. He means well, but he was weak when it mattered. When Clay started threatening your father, Whitmore did nothing. Papa took research when he left the company. He brought it here. Boxes of files, computer drives, notebooks filled with designs I couldn't understand. He was paranoid those last weeks, always looking over his shoulder, checking the locks twice, 3 times. What was he afraid of? Reynolds had people following him, cars parked outside our apartment at all hours, phone calls where nobody spoke. Eduardo wanted to go public with evidence of what Reynolds was doing, but what? But then I got pregnant with Sophia, and Eduardo had to choose between justice and keeping his family safe. Miguel felt something cold settle in his stomach. He chose us. He tried to make a deal with Reynolds. He'd stay quiet if Clay left us alone, but Clay wanted more. He wanted all of Eduardo's research, wanted him to sign papers saying the company owned everything he'd ever invented or ever would invent. Papa refused. He signed everything except one document, something about a special project he'd been working on. Clay got obsessed with finding it. The harassment got worse. Then one morning, Eduardo said he was going to meet someone who could help make things right. He kissed you goodbye, told me he'd be home for dinner. Elena's voice broke. The police found him in his car by the lake. Heart attack, they said. 29 years old. You don't believe that. 2 days after the funeral, men in suits came to the house. Very polite, very professional, offered me money, a lot of money, to hand over all of Eduardo's research and sign some papers. When I refused, they got less polite. What happened? They broke in while we were at your grandmother's, took almost everything, but I'd hidden some things, the important things. She stood and walked to the kitchen drawer, pulling out a small key. Storage unit on 47th, number 3247. I saved what I could. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to be safe, to have a normal life, not spend your years chasing ghosts and making enemies of billionaires. She reached across and grabbed his hand. Miguel, please let this go. I can't lose you too. But they both knew he couldn't. Later that night, Miguel texted Carlos. Need your help. Meet me tomorrow 6 a.m. Bring your laptop. Carlos showed up at the storage facility with coffee and his gear. Man, it's Sunday. This better be worth it. Remember that rich guy? Turns out he knew my papa. And my papa wasn't just some mechanic. He was an inventor. Had his own company until his partner screwed him over. Seriously, yeah. And my mom's been hiding his stuff here all these years. The storage unit was cramped and dusty. Boxes were stacked floor to ceiling, labeled in Elena's careful handwriting. They found what they were looking for in the third box, several old hard drives, and a laptop that looked ancient. Can you get into these? Miguel asked. Carlos grinned. Does Chicago have wind? While Carlos worked on cracking the old encryption, Miguel went through physical files. Most were technical drawings beyond his understanding, but one folder caught his attention: Reynolds' evidence. Inside were emails, financial documents, and handwritten notes. As Miguel read, a pattern emerged. Reynolds had been systematically stealing Eduardo's designs, filing patents through shell companies, selling to defense contractors without Eduardo's knowledge. "Yo, check this out," Carlos called. The laptop screen showed dozens of files. Carlos clicked on one labeled Final Project. Eduardo Ramírez appeared on screen, looking tired and stressed. "If you're watching this, then something's happened to me. My name is Eduardo Ramírez, and I need to document what Clayton Reynolds has done." Miguel's throat tightened, hearing his father's voice. "Clay's been selling our technology to defense contractors, modifying my designs for weapon systems. But that's not the worst part. He's been testing these weapons illegally, covering up failures that have cost lives. I have proof. Emails, test results, even recorded conversations." Eduardo held up a small device. "This is why they want me dead. I've created something that could make all their weapons obsolete, a resonance neutralizer that can detect and counteract the frequencies used in modern guidance systems. In the right hands, it could save thousands of lives. In the wrong hands," the video cut off abruptly. "There's more," Carlos said, clicking through files. "Blueprints, test results, even recorded phone calls. Your dad was building a case. Why didn't he use it? Maybe he didn't get the chance." Miguel's phone buzzed. A text from Whitmore, "Found something. Reynolds just filed new patents last week, based on your father's work. We need to meet." They met at Whitmore's office that evening. "He'd been busy. I still have contacts in the industry," Whitmore explained. "People talk. Reynolds has been developing something big, a new weapons platform based on technology that sounds exactly like what Eduardo was working on. The neutralizer. No, the opposite. He's weaponized Eduardo's detection system, turned it into the most advanced targeting platform ever created. The Pentagon's already placed orders worth $2 billion. We have to stop him." "How?" "He's got lawyers, politicians, probably half the defense industry in his pocket. We go public, release everything." Whitmore shook his head. "It's not enough. These files are 20 years old. Reynolds will claim they're fake, that Eduardo sold him the rights legitimately. We need current evidence." That's when Miguel remembered something from the video, the way his father had emphasized certain words, the strange pause after "in the wrong hands." "The pendant," he said suddenly. "What about it? My dad said there was more to it than you knew." What if, back in his room, Miguel examined the pendant more carefully than ever before? The design was intricate, two hands cradling a star. But looking closer, he noticed the star wasn't solid. It was composed of tiny lines that almost looked like circuit paths. "Microchip," he whispered. Using tools from his backpack, Miguel carefully opened the pendant. Inside was a tiny chip, no bigger than a grain of rice. "Carlos," he called, "I need you." 20 minutes later, Carlos arrived with his equipment. "Data storage chip," he confirmed. "Old school but sophisticated. Give me a few minutes." The chip contained a single folder for Miguel. With trembling fingers, Miguel opened it. Inside were dozens of files, documents, audio recordings, and one video labeled "The Truth." His father appeared on screen again, but this recording was different. He was sitting in what looked like their old apartment. Miguel recognized the faded wallpaper. "Hello, Hijo. If you're watching this, you're old enough to understand. And if you found this message, you're smart enough to have figured out the pendant's secret." Miguel felt tears welling up. "By now you know about Reynolds and what he did, but there's more. Clay wasn't just stealing my patents. He was selling them to people who used them for terrible things, weapons that killed innocent people, surveillance systems used by dictators. I tried to stop him legally, but he owned judges, politicians, even police." Eduardo's expression grew serious. "When I threatened to go public, he made it clear he'd hurt your mother, hurt you, so I made a choice. I pretended to give up, to accept his terms. But secretly, I was gathering evidence and working on something special." He held up a small device. "This is a kill switch for every weapon system based on my technology. It works, Miguel. I've tested it, but using it would mean war with Reynolds, and I couldn't risk your safety. 3 days ago, Clay's men tried to break into our apartment while you and your mother were out. They were looking for this device, and something else, a component I call the resonance crystal. Without it, the kill switch is useless. Eduardo leaned closer to the camera. I've hidden the crystal somewhere safe, somewhere only my son would think to look. Remember our last project together, the one we never finished? The video ended. What's he talking about? Carlos asked. Miguel closed his eyes, thinking back. He'd been so young when his father died, but there was one memory that stood out clearly. The music box, he said. We were building a music box for Mama's birthday. We never finished it after Papi died. You still have it, in my closet. They found the half-completed music box buried under old clothes. Carlos examined it with a flashlight. There, he pointed. That compartment doesn't belong in a normal music box. Carefully, Miguel opened it. Inside was a small clear crystal, no bigger than a marble, suspended in a protective case. The resonance crystal, Miguel breathed. The files from the pendant painted a complete picture. Eduardo had built a dead man's switch into all his patents. If someone tried to weaponize them beyond certain parameters, the systems would automatically shut down, but Reynolds had been manually overriding the safety protocols every 6 months. Look at this, Carlos said, pointing to a log file. The next reset is due in 10 days. If nobody enters the code, every weapon system based on your dad's tech stops working. They needed help. Miguel reached out to Maria Delgado, an investigative journalist Carlos's cousin knew. She reviewed their evidence with growing amazement. This is explosive, she said, but also dangerous. Reynolds isn't just rich. He's connected. Defense contractors, senators, intelligence agencies all rely on his technology. People need to know the truth, Miguel insisted. I agree, but we need protection first. Let me reach out to some contacts. That night, Miguel finally told his mother everything. Elena listened in silence, tears streaming down her face as she heard her husband's voice on the recordings. I knew he was gathering evidence, she said softly, but I begged him to stop. I was pregnant with Sophia, scared for our family. Are you angry at him for choosing justice over safety? I was for a long time, but your father believed that talent came with responsibility. That if you could make the world better, you had an obligation to try. She squeezed his hand. You're just like him. The next morning, everything went wrong. Carlos texted at dawn. Someone broke into the computer lab, stole the drives we were using. They met at their usual diner. Carlos was shaken. There's more. Black SUV parked outside my parents' restaurant all morning. My dad's freaking out. Miguel's phone rang. Unknown number. Miguel Ramírez. The voice was cold, professional. My name is Marcus Kane. I work for Mr. Reynolds. He'd like to meet with you. Not interested. I think you will be. We have your friend Carlos's parents in custody. Immigration issues, you understand. Of course, these things can be resolved. Miguel's blood went cold. He looked at Carlos, whose face had gone ashen. What do you want? Simple. Bring everything. All the files, the device your father made, the crystal. Bring it to the address I'm about to text you. Come alone. You have 2 hours, or Carlos's parents take a very long trip. The line went dead. Chapter 5. The Price of Loyalty. The safe house felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Carlos sat in the corner staring at his phone, while the others argued about their next move. The $5 million in his account seemed to pulse on the screen like a heartbeat. We stick to the plan, Whitmore insisted. When Reynolds tries to reset the weapon systems. If he tries, Maria interrupted. He has to try, Miguel said. Without the reset, billions in defense contracts become worthless in 9 days. Carlos still hadn't spoken. His phone kept buzzing, text from his parents, his sisters, cousins he hadn't heard from in years. Word had gotten out about the money. Carlos, Elena said gently, talk to us. $5 million, Carlos whispered. My parents have worked their whole lives and never seen a fraction of that. They could retire. My sisters could go to any school they want. It's blood money, Miguel said. Is it, or is it just practical? Carlos looked up, his eyes tortured. What if we lose? What if Reynolds walks away clean and we're left with nothing? We won't lose, Miguel insisted. We have the evidence, the crystal. Evidence can be discredited. Crystals can be stolen. But $5 million? Carlos shook his head. That's real. That's security. That's betrayal. Miguel shot back. The words hung in the air like a slap. Carlos flinched as if struck. You think this is easy for me? Carlos demanded. You think I want to? He stopped, running his hands through his hair. I need some air. He left the room. Through the window, they watched him pace the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear. He's calling them, Maria said, quietly. He won't turn, Miguel said. But uncertainty colored his voice. Carlos wouldn't do that. But even as he spoke, doubt crept in. $5 million was life-changing money, and Carlos's family had sacrificed so much. An hour passed, then two. Carlos remained outside, a lone figure in the parking lot. Finally, as midnight approached, he came back in. I need to check something, he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. He went to his laptop, began typing rapidly. Carlos, Miguel moved closer. Just give me a minute. Carlos's fingers flew over the keyboard. Code scrolled across the screen, the program they'd uploaded to Reynolds' system. Then Miguel saw it. A small change in the code, barely noticeable, unless you knew what to look for. What did you do? Carlos kept typing. Nothing. Just checking for bugs. But Miguel knew his friend's tells, the slight tremor in his voice, the way he wouldn't make eye contact. You modified the code. The room went silent, Carlos's fingers still on the keyboard. Carlos, Elena said softly, what did you do? Finally, Carlos looked up. His eyes were red, filled with tears. I'm sorry. The words hit Miguel like a physical blow. No, they threatened my parents' citizenship, said they'd find violations, get them deported. My sisters were born here, but my parents, Carlos's voice broke. I can't let them be separated, so you sold us out. I made it look like a glitch. The program will still work, just not the way we planned. Reynolds will be able to reset the systems, but it'll look suspicious. We can still use that. To do what? Give him a slap on the wrist while he keeps making billions from my father's stolen work. Eli, please understand. Understand what? That you chose money over justice. That you betrayed everything we've worked for. Carlos stood abruptly. Not everyone can afford to be noble, Miguel. Not everyone has the luxury of principles when their family's on the line. My father died for his principles, and look where it got him. The words echoed in the sudden silence. Carlos immediately looked stricken. Miguel, I didn't mean, get out. What? You heard me. Take your money, and get out. Carlos looked around the room, seeking support, but found only disappointed faces. Even Maria, who understood the complexities of compromise better than most, couldn't meet his eyes. I'm sorry, Carlos whispered again, then gathered his things, and left. As the door closed behind him, Miguel felt something inside him break. Carlos had been his best friend since second grade. They'd shared everything, dreams, fears, hopes for the future. We're compromised, Whitmore said grimly. If Carlos gave them access to our plans, he wouldn't. Miguel started, then stopped. An hour ago, he would have sworn Carlos would never betray them at all. We need to assume the worst, Maria said. Change locations, alter our strategy. As they hurriedly packed up, Miguel's phone buzzed. A text from Carlos, asterisk. Check your email. I'm sorry. Against his better judgment, Miguel opened his email. There was a message from Carlos with an attachment. They made me forward this to Kane, but I made a copy first. Use it, please. The attachment was a video file. Miguel played it, and Reynolds appeared on screen. But this was different from his public persona. He was in what looked like a private office, speaking to someone off camera. The Ramirez kid has to be handled, Reynolds was saying. Just like his father, Make it look like an accident. Gang violence maybe. Nobody will question another dead Latino kid from Pilsen. The room went deathly quiet. My God, Elena whispered. There's more, Miguel said, fast-forwarding. The video showed Reynolds meeting with various people, discussing bribes, cover-ups, and most damningly, the murder of Eduardo Ramirez. I want it to look natural, Reynolds said in one clip. Heart attack. He's young, but these things happen. Dr. Morrison knows what to do. Carlos recorded this. Maria asked. No, Miguel realized. He found it in Reynolds' own files. The idiot was keeping blackmail material on himself. Or someone was keeping it on him. Either way, this changes everything, Whitmore said. But even as hope rekindled, Miguel felt the sting of betrayal. Carlos had given them this evidence, yes, but he'd still modified the code, still taken the money. What do we do now? Elena asked. We adapt, Maria said. This video is dynamite, but we need to verify its authenticity, and we need to protect ourselves. Reynolds just ordered a hit on Miguel. I have contacts in the FBI, Whitmore said. Real ones, not like the actors I hired. They've been building a case against Reynolds for years. This might be what they need. And the weapon systems, Miguel asked. Without Carlos's original code, we can't force Reynolds' hand, but maybe we don't need to. This video might be enough. They relocated to a new safe house, a cabin outside the city that belonged to one of Whitmore's friends. As dawn broke, they made contact with FBI Special Agent Patricia Williams, who had been investigating Reynolds for years. This video is exactly what we've been looking for, she said, after reviewing it. But we need to move fast. Reynolds has connections everywhere, Miguel asked. Especially in my agency, Williams replied grimly. That's why we're keeping this close. Only my most trusted people know. As they planned their next move, Miguel's phone rang. Carlos. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Miguel, Carlos's voice was strained. They know about the video. Kane's coming for you. They tracked your phones. The line went dead. We need to go, Miguel said. Now, they grabbed their essential materials and fled, just as black SUVs appeared on the cabin's access road. Agent Williams led them through back roads, her team providing cover. Where are we going? Elena asked. Federal courthouse, Williams replied. Judge Morris is standing by with warrants. Once we file this evidence officially, Reynolds can't make it disappear. But Reynolds had one more card to play. As they neared the courthouse, Williams' radio crackled. Hostage situation at the courthouse. Armed men have taken control. They're demanding to speak to someone named Miguel Ramírez. Miguel felt his blood run cold. They're using hostages to flush me out. We can't let you go in there, Williams said. You have to. They'll kill people. That's exactly what they want. You walk in, you die. The evidence dies with you. But Miguel was already forming a plan. Not if we're smart about it. He outlined his idea quickly. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it might work. 30 minutes later, Miguel walked into the courthouse alone, hands raised. Kane waited in the lobby, surrounded by armed men and terrified hostages. Smart boy, Kane said. Where's the evidence? Safe. Let the hostages go, and I'll tell you. Not how this works. Kane raised his weapon. Last chance. You're right, Miguel said. It's not how this works. At that moment, every screen in the courthouse lit up. The video of Reynolds played on loop. His confession, his orders for murder, his casual discussion of bribes and cover-ups. What the Kane spun around. Live broadcast, Miguel said. Every news station in the country, plus social media. It's over. Kane's face contorted with rage. He aimed his gun at Miguel. You little. The shot never came. FBI agents burst through every entrance. The takedown was swift, professional. Kane and his men surrendered without firing a shot. Even they knew when the game was lost. As Kane was led away in handcuffs, he passed Miguel. You have no idea what you've started, kid. Maybe not, Miguel replied. But I know what I finished. Hours later, as the sun set over Chicago, Miguel stood outside the courthouse with his mother, Whitmore, and Agent Williams. Reynolds had been arrested at his mansion, caught trying to flee the country. The weapons systems were being shut down globally, their safety protocols permanently engaged. Your father would be proud, Elena said, squeezing Miguel's hand. I know. Miguel touched the pendant at his neck, filled once again with its hidden chip. But it's not over. There's still the trial, the lawsuits. Let tomorrow worry about tomorrow, Whitmore said. Today, Eduardo Ramirez's son did what his father couldn't. You brought down an empire. As they talked, a familiar figure approached hesitantly. Carlos stood at the edge of the courthouse steps, looking uncertain. I testified, he said quietly. Gave back the money, told them everything. Miguel studied his former best friend. The betrayal still stung, might always sting. But he also understood the impossible position Carlos had been in. Your parents? Miguel asked. Safe. The FBI's protecting them. Carlos, I don't. Miguel held up his hand. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. Carlos nodded, understanding. Some wounds needed time to heal. Some betrayals, even those born of love and fear, left scars that lasted. As Carlos walked away, Miguel felt his mother's arm around his shoulders. You did good, Mio, she said. Your papa's watching, and he's smiling. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the evening sky. Miguel touched his pendant one more time, thinking of his father, of justice delayed but not denied, of truth that refused to stay buried. The war wasn't over, but today they'd won a crucial battle, and sometimes that was enough. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, but tonight, under the stars his father had once shown him how to find. Miguel Ramírez allowed himself a moment of peace. He'd kept his promise. He'd finished what his father started, and somewhere, he knew Eduardo Ramírez was finally at rest. Chapter 6. Legacy of Light. The federal courthouse had become a makeshift war room. FBI agents worked alongside tech specialists, sifting through decades of Reynolds Defense Industries files, while Miguel sat with Agent Patricia Williams, reviewing the video evidence that had brought an empire to its knees. Your father was meticulous, Williams said, studying the documents. This recording alone provides phrases we've been trying to prove for years. But there's something bothering me. What's that? How did your father manage to record Reynolds saying these things? Some of these conversations happened in secured locations. Reynolds' private office, his home study, places that were regularly swept for bugs. Miguel frowned. It was a question he hadn't considered in the chaos of recent events. He pulled out his laptop and began examining the audio files more carefully. The quality was too good, too clear for a hidden microphone, and the angles in the video footage, these weren't recorded secretly. Miguel realized Reynolds was recording himself. Why would he do that? Insurance, or leverage? Miguel's mind raced. My papa was brilliant with electronics. What if he didn't plant bugs in Reynolds' office? What if he modified Reynolds' own security system to create these recordings? Williams leaned forward. Keep going. Reynolds is paranoid. He'd want recordings of every meeting in case someone tried to blackmail him or renege on a deal. But my dad could have programmed the system to create a separate archive, one Reynolds didn't know about, hidden in plain sight. Williams mused. Brilliant. But how did these recordings end up in Reynolds' own files where Carlos found them? Before Miguel could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but something made him answer. Miguel Ramírez. The voice was elderly, refined. My name is Dr. James Morrison. I believe it's time we spoke about your father. Miguel's blood ran cold. Dr. Morrison, the name Reynolds had mentioned in the recording, the doctor who was supposed to make Eduardo's death look natural. What do you want? To clear my conscience. I'm dying, Mr. Ramírez. Cancer. I have weeks, perhaps days. Before I go, I need to tell someone the truth about what happened to your father. Miguel looked at Williams, who was already signaling her agents to trace the call. I'm listening, Miguel said. Not over the phone. FBI headquarters. 1 hour. I'll turn myself in. I want immunity for what I'm about to reveal. Not for me, but for my daughter. She knew nothing about any of this. The line went dead. An hour later, Dr. Morrison sat across from Miguel in an FBI interview room. He was frail, his skin papery, but his eyes were sharp with intelligence and regret. I was Reynolds' personal physician, he began. Also his fixer when medical situations arose. But your father was different. I'd never been asked to kill anyone before, but you did it anyway. No, Morrison's answer surprised everyone. I refused. Reynolds was furious, threatened my medical license, my family, but I couldn't do it. I took an oath to do no harm. Then how did my father die? Reynolds had backup plans. There was an experimental drug, something developed for the CIA during the Cold War. Undetectable, mimics a natural heart attack perfectly. He had someone else administer it, someone who worked in the restaurant where your father had his last meal. Miguel felt sick. His father had been poisoned during lunch. Probably never even knew what hit him. But that's not why I'm here, Morrison continued. I'm here because of what happened after. Reynolds was paranoid about loose ends. He kept recordings of everything, including the meetings where he planned your father's murder. I knew where he hid these recordings, and you took them. I copied them. I've been moving them around for 20 years, keeping them safe, waiting for the right moment. When I heard about your confrontation with Reynolds, I knew it was time. I'm the one who made sure those recordings ended up where your friend Carlos could find them. Williams leaned forward. You've been playing a long game. The longest. Reynolds destroyed a good man, left a boy without his father. I couldn't save Eduardo Ramirez, but maybe I could help his son get justice. Where are the rest of the recordings? Miguel asked. Morrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a small hard drive. Everything. 20 years of Reynolds' crimes, financial fraud, bribery, weapons sold to terrorist organizations, and yes, murder, not just your father. There were others who got in his way. Williams took the drive carefully. With your testimony and these recordings, you can bury him. And everyone who helped him, Morrison finished. As Morrison was led away to provide his formal statement, Miguel's phone buzzed. It was Whitmore. Turn on the news, he said. Reynolds is making a statement. They found a television in the break room. Reynolds stood outside his mansion, flanked by expensive lawyers, looking every inch the persecuted businessman. These allegations are part of a coordinated attack on American industry, he declared. Foreign agents working with domestic terrorists have fabricated evidence to destroy one of this nation's vital defense contractors. I call on all patriotic Americans to see through this deception. He's trying to spin this as espionage, Williams muttered. But Reynolds wasn't finished. I have evidence that Miguel Ramírez has been in contact with Iranian intelligence, that the technology his father stole was intended for our enemies. This isn't about justice, it's about treason. Miguel felt his anger rising. He's lying. Of course he is, Williams said. But he's got media contacts, political allies. He's trying to muddy the waters, make this about national security instead of his crimes. Miguel's phone buzzed again. This time it was Carlos. You need to see this, Carlos said when Miguel answered. Reynolds isn't just making random accusations. He's got manufactured evidence, fake emails, doctored photos. He's been preparing for this. How do you know? Because Kane tried to get me to create some of it before I turned on you guys. He wanted me to hack your email, plant evidence. I refused, but someone else must have done it. Miguel felt the walls closing in. Reynolds was fighting back with everything he had. Carlos, where are you? Outside. I want to help. I know I messed up, but come in. We need you. 20 minutes later, Carlos was in the FBI's cyber crimes unit, his fingers flying over a keyboard as he traced the fake evidence back to its source. Got it, he said finally. The forgeries came from a server farm in Nevada, shell company owned by Surprise Surprise, a subsidiary of Reynolds Defense Industries. Can you prove it? Williams asked. Better. I can show you the metadata proving when these files were created, all within the last 48 hours, and I can trace the payment for the server farm directly to Reynolds' personal accounts. Miguel watched his friend work, seeing the determination in Carlos's eyes. The betrayal still stung, but Carlos was trying to make things right. There's something else, Carlos said. Before everything went down, I installed a back door in Reynolds' network. I can still access their internal communications. That's illegal, Williams pointed out. So is murder, Carlos shot back. Look, Reynolds is planning something. His private security force is mobilizing, and there are messages about securing the secondary site. What secondary site? Carlos pulled up a schematic. Underground facility in Wisconsin. Off the books, not on any official company records, but I found references to it in the encrypted files. Miguel studied the layout. It's a bunker. He's planning to run. Not just run, Carlos corrected. Look at these inventory lists: weapons, servers, communication equipment. He's setting up a command center. Williams was already on her phone. I need surveillance on a location in Wisconsin, possible fugitive situation. But Miguel was thinking about something else: the resonance crystal. The real one his mother had kept hidden. Reynolds still thought he had it, but without it, his weapon systems would eventually shut down. He's going to try to reverse engineer the crystal, Miguel realized. That's why he needs the command center. He's going to try to break my father's encryption before the systems fail. Then we need to stop him, Williams said. No, Miguel said firmly. I need to stop him. This started with my father, and it's going to end with me. Williams shook her head. I can't authorize a civilian. You don't have to. I'm not asking for permission. Before anyone could stop him, Miguel was moving. He grabbed his backpack, checking that the real resonance crystal was still secure in its hidden compartment. Miguel, wait, Carlos called after him. Miguel paused at the door. You coming or not? Carlos didn't hesitate. Let's finish this. As they raced toward Wisconsin, Miguel's phone rang. It was Maria Delgado. Whatever you're planning, make it fast, she said. Reynolds just gave another interview. He's claiming the video evidence is deep-faked, that you're part of a conspiracy to destroy American defense capabilities. Some people are buying it. Let them. We're about to make it impossible for him to keep lying. The Wisconsin facility was hidden beneath a renovated industrial complex. As they approached, they could see Reynolds' security forces setting up a perimeter. How do we get in? Carlos asked. Miguel smiled grimly. The same way my father would have, through the back door he built into every system he ever designed. Using a tablet, Miguel accessed the facility's environmental controls. Eduardo Ramirez's hidden signature was there, buried in the code after 20 years. Papa always said, every castle needs a secret entrance. Miguel murmured as he input a sequence. Around the facility, ventilation fans reversed, alarms misfired, and security doors unlocked randomly. In the chaos, Miguel and Carlos slipped inside. They found Reynolds in a sterile laboratory, surrounded by technicians working frantically on equipment. The fake resonance crystal sat in a testing chamber, inert and useless. It's over, Reynolds, Miguel announced. Reynolds spun around, his mask of composure cracking. You arrogant little, do you have any idea what you've done? The systems I control protect this country. The systems my father designed save lives. You turned them into weapons. Your father was a dreamer who didn't understand how the world works. My father understood perfectly. That's why he built safeguards into everything he created. Miguel held up the real resonance crystal. Without this, your entire weapons network shuts down in 3 days. And I'm the only one who knows how it works. Reynolds' face went purple with rage. Give it to me. No, but I'll make you a deal. Confess publicly to everything. The theft, the murders, all of it. Do that, and I'll show you how to convert the weapon systems back to their original purpose, saving lives instead of taking them. You expect me to destroy myself. You already did that when you killed my father. This is just making it official. For a moment, it looked like Reynolds might physically attack him. Then his shoulders sagged. I had no choice, he said quietly. Your father was going to ruin everything. The contracts, the money, the power. You had every choice. Miguel cut him off. You chose wrong. FBI agents flooded the facility. Williams had followed them, bringing backup. As Reynolds was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Miguel. Your father would be proud, he said bitterly. I know, Miguel replied. Chapter 7. Echoes of Tomorrow. 6 months later, Miguel stood in the cemetery, fresh flowers in his hand. The headstone was simple. Eduardo Ramirez, inventor, father. He, Papa, Miguel said softly. Thought you'd want to know what's been happening. He knelt, placing the flowers carefully. Reynolds got life without parole. 14 counts of fraud, 3 counts of murder, and about 50 other charges. His whole network came tumbling down. Turns out when you squeeze people hard enough, they start talking to save themselves. A breeze rustled through the trees, and Miguel smiled. Carlos and I started a non-profit with Maria. We're exposing corruption, helping whistleblowers. He's still trying to make up for but we're getting there. Forgiveness takes time. Footsteps approached. Elena joined him, placing her own flowers beside his. The ceremony's about to start, she said gently. They walked together to the nearby community center where a crowd had gathered. A banner read, "Grand Opening. The Eduardo Ramirez Innovation Center." Whitmore stood at the podium, looking healthier than he had in years. The guilt that had weighed him down was finally lifting. Eduardo Ramirez believed that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. Whitmore told the crowd. This center will carry on that vision, providing resources and mentorship to young inventors who want to change the world. Applause filled the room. Miguel spotted familiar faces. Agent Williams, now heading a task force investigating defense contractor corruption. Dr. Morrison's daughter, who had become an advocate for corporate accountability. Even some of Reynolds' former employees who had chosen conscience over complicity. Carlos approached, looking nervous. "Ready for your speech?" Miguel nodded. Their friendship was still healing, but they were working on it. Trust once broken had to be rebuilt brick by brick. Taking the podium, Miguel looked out at the crowd. In the front row sat Sophia, now 9, wearing a t-shirt that read "Future Engineer."